Bom dia a todos. Hi, hello everyone. Welcome you all. Good morning here from Brazil, but I guess people are connecting from different time zones, and I'm here to say welcome to you all on behalf of the Brazilian Center for International Relations, CEBRI, an institution that has been leading discussions on international affairs here from Brazil. And in a very special year this year, when Brazil will be the host, the president of the BRICS meeting, and the BRICS summit will be taking place in Rio de Janeiro, in the city here in Brazil, in July this year. So CEBRI is very excited about this webinar today. The whole team has worked a lot on a project that has to do with the BRICS and the Brazilian presidency. And this is the first meeting that we're going to have, but we have planned a series of events, both online and also in-person events by the side of the BRICS summit taking place in Rio, early July. And we are trying to address in these different conversations the different topics that will be of importance to the Brazilian presidency, but also to the different Brazilian stakeholders that participate in the meetings, that have something to say about international affairs and how Brazil and the different BRICS countries use international affairs strategies for its development strategies, how these two things combined. And certainly the BRICS is part of this effort, and hosting the BRICS in Brazil this year, it's a very important occasion because there are lots of geopolitical events taking place at the same time. So countries, leaders need opportunities for dialogues. They need opportunities to talk to each other, to understand each other, and to try to go through the different challenges that countries are facing in this context, in terms of trade, in terms of development, in terms of peace, and all this geopolitical context that we are all involved in. So today's event will be discussing the views from Brazil about the BRICS in general. So why is Brazil interested in hosting events like this? Why does this matter, right? And we will have a special focus on two areas which have to do with the energy transition and what we call the twin transitions, right? So the energy transition at the same time when we are challenged also to go through a digital transition that we're all facing as societies around the world. And we're very, very happy that in this context of this project at CEBRI, we were able to have the support, and not only the support to make all these activities happen, but also the intellectual support on thinking about all these different conversations of Siemens Energy, now represented here by Mr. Henrique Paiva. And Henrique, we would like to thank you very much for your support and for believing in our project and our initiative, and for being there with you. And with that, I will give the screen to you for you to make your remarks. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and a special thanks to our panelists who are here with us today.
Thank you, Larissa. Good morning, good afternoon, or good night to everybody that is joining today. Through Larissa, I say hello to everybody. We at Siemens Energy, we're more than happy to partner with CEBRI, a long-term partner of us. And we could not lose the chance to have this moment on BRICS in Brazil, to demonstrate how important this is for us. Not just because in terms of like the large market that all the BRICS countries represent nowadays for Siemens Energy in general, but also the reason for the geopolitical positioning in terms of how this is important globally, and how Siemens Energy is dealing, not just looking for having projects or selling products in these regions, but also having like job creations in these countries that later on we can transfer to other regions, other countries that we are. We are present in more than 90 countries nowadays. But also in terms of like innovation centers that we are bringing this to other countries and to other regions. And I think one of the most important things that will be discussed today, somehow mentioned already by Larissa, it's most of the growth of energy will come from these countries, from BRICS and BRICS expanded, I could say. And the demand of energy on this, they're still lacking of like some kind of like modernization or so we have a chance to already either start or either have like an implementation of projects that already have the most like the latest innovative products that we can implement there, looking for to how can we support the country into its path for low carbon emissions. So with that, I will I just repeat my very big thank to all the CEBRI team that was very supportive on making this happen, and all the panelists that agreed to join with us. It's an honor for us at Siemens Energy to have such a notable people, and I'm really looking forward for the discussion and for what you have to teach us. And with that, I pass the ball, I think, to Larissa or Augusto. I think it's to Augusto, right? Sorry if I have a mistake here. Thank you so much. Again, good morning, good afternoon, or good night.
Thank you, Henrique. So before giving the floor or the screen to Augusto, I will just briefly introduce him to let everyone know who he is, because he is very modest and I'm sure he wouldn't do that properly. Augusto is a career diplomat that has been in the Foreign Service for quite some time, since 2003. He is a lawyer on his original career background, but he also has a PhD in international affairs, and he is currently at the coordination of the BRICS within like the BRICS presidency unit within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Brazil. So this is the group that is directly supporting our diplomats in the organization of all the meetings that have to do with the BRICS. And for those that don't know, actually there are a series of meetings involved from very different areas. So we're very happy to have Augusto, or Guto for his friends who know him, here joining us. Thank you, Guto, for being there. We know that this is a very busy time for all of you at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but especially at the BRICS unit. And we're looking forward to hearing your comments. So the screen is all yours. Thank you.
Well, hello, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank CEBRI, and especially, of course, Larissa and Henrique for the invitation and for the very kind words. It's a great pleasure to be here. I don't have exactly a speech, just some ideas I'd like to share with you on BRICS, on how BRICS fit into Brazilian foreign policy today, and of course, on the priorities for the Brazilian BRICS presidency this year. Before I start, just the usual disclaimers. Everything that I say here is just my own thoughts and ideas and does not necessarily reflect the views from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or the Brazilian government. And secondly, I'm not a BRICS specialist. This is the first time I work directly with BRICS. I came back from my previous assignment overseas in December, and I joined the Brazilian BRICS team in early January. Having said that, I believe one useful distinction we should make when discussing the BRICS is that it has two very different dimensions. BRICS is a coordination forum with regards to the issues in the international agenda, and BRICS is also a cooperation platform for its members. Bearing in mind these distinctions, I will make 3 points. First, the new geopolitical landscape poses new challenges for the BRICS, especially as a coordination forum. As you know, as a group, BRICS was created on 2 assumptions. First, it's a group of large emerging economies bound to grow much faster than its developed peers. And secondly, and as a consequence of the first assumption, with more economic weight, more economic clout, BRICS countries deserve a larger share and voice in the main and the existing international organizations. After the enlargement last year, BRICS now represent around half the world population, almost 40% of global GDP in PPP terms, and more or less 25% of international trade and investment. All BRICS countries are very important in their regions. We simply cannot think of any effective international system in which BRICS countries are not very important players. On the second assumption, however, the outcomes, I think it's fair to say that the outcomes are still incomplete, and the perspectives, of course, in the current geopolitical environment is very uncertain. The reform of the IMF and the World Bank has been way short of the expectations we had back in 2009, 2010, when the group was created. The trade multilateral system, the WTO, is going through probably its most important crisis since the WTO was created in 1995, to say the least. The reform of the UN Security Council to update it to the realities of the 21st century is still not in the horizon. Not to mention, of course, the recent developments in the World Health Organization, the Paris Agreement, and the international fight against poverty and hunger. So it's a completely different scenario from 2009 when the BRICS was established. And in my view, in this new environment, it doesn't seem enough just to expect to have a larger share or more seats on the table. I believe BRICS is nowadays a challenge to articulate a clear view on how they see the evolution of those international organizations and institutions, and should be more proactive on the search for real solutions to strengthen multilateralism in areas such as trade, international development, and the fight against climate change. This is, of course, much easier said than done. It's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. And meanwhile, of course, we have to manage the risk of more fragmentation in the international system. But to be fair, on the other side, we have to see that BRICS back in 2014 was able to do exactly that. Like when we created the NDB, the BRICS Development Bank, and the CRA, the Contingency Reserve Arrangement, not as an alternative, but as complementary institutions to the existing international organizations. So to sum up my first point, I believe that the same spirit should guide the group from now onwards. So making the international system more effective, complementing it when necessary, and reinforcing, of course, its development dimension. My second point is on intra-BRICS cooperation. One of the surprises I had when I joined the BRICS team back in January was how intra-BRICS cooperation has grown exponentially in the last 15 years and covers today a very wide range of topics. IPEA, which is our economic policy research think tank, has mapped 184 instances of cooperation within BRICS, We have plenty of working groups, task forces, and such like arrangements in lots of different areas, going from agriculture to space agencies. And now, of course, as you know, we have not only 5 but 11 members with after the enlargement, which of course enriches a lot the debate, but makes consensus a bit harder to achieve in all cooperation areas. As you know, BRICS has neither a permanent secretariat nor a founding treaty. We rely heavily on the rotating president system. I'm not saying, of course, that we should formalize BRICS into an international treaty or create a secretariat. One of the beauties of the group is exactly to be flexible and diverse. But we have to find ways in this new situation that we have to find a way to ensure effectiveness, consistency, and continuity throughout the rotating presidencies, especially after the enlargement. And reinforcing and making intra-BRICS cooperation makes a lot of sense for a country like Brazil. 36% of Brazilian exports last year went to BRICS countries. But if you take like 28% of this 36% was just to China. So in other words, just 80% of Brazilian exports go to the other 9 members of BRICS, some of them very like fast-growing economies with huge populations such as India and Indonesia. So it's totally in our interest to invest in initiatives and frameworks to facilitate trade, investment, and financial flows within BRICS. And this brings me to my final and third point, which is the priorities of the Brazilian presidency, how we have reacted to those challenges that I mentioned before when setting these priorities. Like from the very start, we had a clear instruction from President Lula that we should have concrete outcomes, not like just diplomatic outcomes, declaration and so on, but real deliverables that have a real impact on our countries, on our populations. So we have set our priorities with that guidance in mind. We have, on the other side, a very challenging presidency because, as you know, the summit will take place in July, not to clash with COP30, which is in November this year. So here in the coordination, the presidency, the BRICS presidency coordination in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we had to identify deliverables in a very short time. Now, in this context, I'd like to highlight some very promising initiatives that has already been approved in the ministerial meetings that we held so far. On agriculture, for example, there was an agreement to establish BRICS Partnership for Land Restoration, aiming at making this issue a higher priority in international organizations and MDBs, and encouraging more investment flows in areas in this area among BRICS countries. This is, of course, a very important issue to address food and energy security. The partnership has also, of course, a very strong dimension of climate mitigation and adaptation, and we hope it can be further developed during the upcoming COP30 in Brazil. Another deliverable that we had in the agricultural ministerial meeting was the commitment to seek more interoperability among the different systems of electronic certification for sanitary and phytosanitary measures, for SPS measures. Of course, this is a measure of great interest, not only for big food exporters like Brazil, but also to countries that rely heavily on imports to achieve food security. On the trade ministerial, we had approved a framework on trade and sustainability, setting some principles to make sure that environmental considerations are consistent with WTO disciplines and not just an excuse for protectionist policies. We have also approved an understanding on the governance of the data economy, which I believe is a crucial agreement in an area that is growing, as everybody knows, exponentially, affecting around 54% of global trading services nowadays. According to the data we have, like international data flows are currently estimated around 2.8 trillion US dollars. And of course, looking only from Brazil's standpoint, this agreement connects our country to some of the most dynamic economies in the world. And this is just to mention what has been approved so far. Of course, all these measures, they have to be endorsed by our leaders in the summit in early July. Moving forward, we have other deliverables in the pipeline that I'd like to mention to you. The first one I'd like to emphasize is the partnership for the elimination of socially determined diseases. This is a very key priority for the Brazilian presidency this year. Socially determined diseases are those that are usually connected to poverty and inequality. They probably because of that, they are usually neglected in the international research agenda. And we hope this partnership will be a landmark to make this a higher priority in international organizations. And this can be a very concrete outcome for the most vulnerable groups in our societies. Another priority is, of course, climate finance. This is an obvious one, as we are currently on the road from Baku to Belém. And it's clear today that we have to find creative ways to gather all the resources needed to complete the energy and the climate transitions, especially in the countries of the Global South. So our idea is to have like 3 statements in the summit. We have like the usual declaration, leaders' declaration that we have every year in the BRICS summit, but also a statement on climate finance. And then to mention the third priority, which exactly will be the issue of the third declaration, that the third statement that we expect to have this year, is the governance of artificial intelligence. Like it's clear that we need to set principles that ensure that the global governance of AI mitigate potential risks of this new technology and address the needs of all countries, especially those from the Global South. And as I said, this will be the issue of a separate statement. We hope this should be an issue of a separate statement in the summit as well. And last but not least, another key deliverable we expect to have this year in the Brazilian presidency is the update of the terms of reference of the BRICS. Like institutional development of the BRICS is a priority for the Brazilian presidency for obvious reasons. As I said before, we have over 108 mechanisms of cooperation in the BRICS. It's clear that there are many like overlaps, duplications there. There's a need to streamline the cooperation work that we have within the BRICS. We have gone from a group of 5 to a group of 11 countries. We have to make sure that we have proper rules, proper governance to ensure that cooperation mechanisms are effective and driven, of course, by the needs of our societies, of our populations. So to sum up, for the sake of time, on coordination, I believe BRICS should have like a more proactive instance on the defense of multilateralism, more focus on the solutions, on the problems in the international agenda, offering concrete solutions to these problems. We need intra-BRICS cooperation on a more organized fashion, avoid duplication, and focusing on initiatives with concrete benefits for our populations. And finally, I believe a great challenge that we have to make an effort to make communication more effective, avoiding BRICS being described as an anti-West mechanisms, which of course is not in our interest. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Augusto. That was a great explanation about the priorities, and it really highlights the abundance of topics. It's very surprising, like all the areas that are being worked on. So you guys certainly have a lot of work to do. Like you've been working a lot for the past few months, but you still have a lot of work ahead towards the summit in the first week of July. So thank you very much for being here with us, and we hope we will have further opportunities of engagement with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on this stance. Please count on us. The goal here is that we will have this webinar today, but we'll have a side event by the BRICS, and then at least one more webinar where we can discuss these different ideas and maybe go deeper into some of those. So we will be trying to help also in the aspect of communication that you also highlighted. Thank you very much. I will now start our first panel. So Augusto, you are invited to either be here with us, or if you need to leave, don't worry about it. We fully understand. And I will now call my three panelists here that I'm very glad to welcome. First, my very good friend and a legend here in Brazil, Renato Baumann, our economist from the IPEA, the Institute of Applied Economic Research of Brazil. Renato has been having different roles as a professor, as a researcher, as the author of different books, and someone that knows a lot about the topics that we're going to discuss, as his background is on trade and economics. So I will go straight to you, Renato, and ask you the first question. I will introduce my other panelists as I also direct questions to them. So Renato, I will start with the following question. In your view, what have been the tangible outcomes of BRICS cooperation in the areas of trade, investment, and finance? Augusto just highlighted the priorities of the BRICS and some of the achievements, but it's very interesting to also hear from the perspective of someone who's been doing also research on that. So how do you evaluate these tangible outcomes and the bloc's ability to develop concrete cooperation in today's world? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Larissa, and thank you, CEBRI, for inviting me. When we think in terms of achievements by the BRICS, two acronyms come to mind, NDB and CRA, which are very good outcomes, as August has just mentioned. But when you go down to trade, even though trade preferences have never been discussed in the group for a number of reasons, the intra-group volume of trade is quite significant. Every BRIC member has more trade with China than with the US. And I think that's an indicator that speaks by itself. The inter-group trade relation is very significant. As per investment, bilateral investment flows have been significant for quite some time, even before the Belt and Road Initiative by China. And in that dimension, investment, Brazil has a very peculiar situation because it receives more than it invests elsewhere. So we are a net receiver of FDI in the group. Finance is also a very outstanding thing because Chinese banks, for instance, have been providing loans for Latin American countries for even more than IADB and World Bank for quite some time now. Of course, these things vary over time. Some are more intense some years than others, but there are a good deal of positive statistics in terms of outcomes in the BRICS. Now, having said that, the very important aspect, and Guto has mentioned that this is the tip of the iceberg. This is the well-known side of the BRICS, with criticisms and positive views and so on. But the work that is being done by our colleagues at the BRICS Think Tank Council, the BTTC, chaired by IPEA this year, I think is very, very, very important. August has mentioned 100 plus number of initiatives. The mapping is all the activities and agreements and initiatives that have taken place, not at the summit level, but at ministerial, hundreds of ministerial meetings that take place and meeting of government agencies that take place every single year. It's hundreds, more than 100 meetings every single year. Now, the mapping of that, right now we have 100 plus initiatives already mapped, and that's only 30%. There are other 70% to go. So the goal is to have, by the end of this year, as complete as possible mapping of that. And my guess is that when we have that mapping complete, the perception of the BRICS will change quite significantly from a skeptical viewpoint to something that we have to recognize that a good deal of work has been done. Now, as per cooperation initiatives in the world, as you asked, I think there are two things that are two challenges, so to speak, to the BRICS. What I mean is that the leitmotif of the group has always been, since Ekaterinburg, since the very beginning, to try and influence the global governance. We are discussing that. It has been mentioned before. How do you do that? There are two prerequisites for that. One, you have to build, and it's a challenging when you have a bigger number of members, a challenge to specify common objectives and common trajectories to try and see exactly what is it that you are going to try and change or influence in the global governance, be it the administration of multilateral agencies, be it common policies, you name it. But there's a second challenge. And the second challenge, I don't see it being often referred in the BRICS documents, which is to have a successful change in some aspects in global governance. For the BRICS required building up a constituency of support, meaning by that, try and convince other developing economies in the same direction of its objectives. It's not only a matter of getting new members all the time. It's impossible. The BRICS won't become a UN General Assembly. There's a limit for that. But you have to build up constituencies of other developing economies that will provide support for your proposals, provided that your proposals, one, exist and be commonly accepted by the members. So I think there is a dimension that is normally not considered by the BRICS, which is how to build up its arguments and try to convince, build up its constituency to try and be able to actually influence global governance. And I think that this is a different aspect from whatever we have seen so far in the BRICS declarations and so on. So in summary, and I think keeping my 5 minutes that I've been granted, there are actually good indicators in terms of intra-group trade, investments, and finance. Of course, a lot more could be done and should be done. The internal discussion about trade, not facilitation, trade preferences is something that is still hanging in the air. The achievements by the NDB, the CRA are very important ones, even considering that we are talking about geographically distant economies and very different historic backgrounds and so on and so forth, which reinforce the value of those two initiatives. But it remains, one, to know exactly the amount of work that has been done, and this is, I hope that by the end of this year we have this mapping done in a more complete way, and to bring into the BRICS the perception of the need to build up a constituency for supporting its initiatives. And that, of course, has to do with the last words by Augusto in terms of a non-ideological approach related to the BRICS actions and initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bauman. Always enlightening to hear you. I will not now call our second panelist, which is Gustavo de Carvalho. Gustavo, despite being a fellow Brazilian, he is nowadays working as a senior researcher at the African Governance and Diplomacy Program of the South African Institute of International Affairs. And he is an expert on multilateralism. Thank you, Gustavo, for joining us and also for being part of our project here at CEBRI and co-authoring a paper with us. So, Gustavo, the question to you is, what do you see as possible impacts of the BRICS expansion on the group's institutionalization, which was highlighted by Augusto Castro as a need? Are there opportunities or risks to consolidate common governance mechanisms within a group that is increasingly diverse? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Larissa, and thank you, CEBRI and Siemens Energy for this really kind invite, and I think a very timely conversation to have before the summits, before all of the chaos of those big summits starts occurring in Rio now in July. And I think the expansion, and particularly the second expansion, we often talk about expansion in 2023 here in Johannesburg as the main expansion, but I think we need to remember that this is the second time that BRICS expand. South Africa, where I've been based for the last 2 decades, was the first country to be invited to join in 2011. But I think now there is certainly a much bigger existential question that the expansion brings that is directly linked to the idea of institutionalization. Because a number of the questions I think Renato and Augusto mentioned earlier, they reflect certain issues related to what is BRICS for each of the members, how do we see it, and what BRICS is not. Because part of it is this tension that often has existed, perhaps managed in a way with less members in less visible ways, between this idea of a group that wants and seeks to change aspects of the global order, ensuring that it's more inclusive, but at the same time, how do we make sure that this is also more effective? Because when we talk about this octopus idea of the 184 plus mechanisms that BRICS has engaged with since its creation, and the number is probably higher than that because there is a number of mechanisms that have been presented within many of the declarations that didn't really take any shape and form. I always remember in 2018, in the last summit here in South Africa, there was a new working group on peacekeeping operations, and as far as I'm concerned, that group never even met. But to a certain degree, what that brings is that why is the agenda of BRICS at times much broader than its counterparts like the G7 or even the G20? Because unlike the G7, we don't have that many cooperation mechanisms amongst ourselves, because we have complementary to the G7 institutions like OECD or many other institutions that deals with many of those things. But there is increasingly that sense that, well, the agenda is getting a little bit too broad. It's becoming a little bit too unpredictable, and we don't quite know what do we do when certain things are decided in Kazan, and perhaps Brazil doesn't want to continue with that because the BRICS presidency has a lot of leeway in terms of setting certain terms of the agenda. If we see in the last 3 years only, we thought here in South Africa that we had a crazy number of meetings during the South African presidency. South Africa had around 200 meetings. Russia, of course, with very specific expectations in terms of showcasing that they were not as isolated. They had over 250 meetings that happened into 2024. Brazil narrowed it down quite a lot. 100 plus meetings being held, already quite a large number, but really focusing on some of those things that Brazil felt were particularly important within those 6 big priorities that Brazil has presented. And I think Augusto earlier mentioned them quite well, but including the issue of institutionalization. Of course, the expansion to a large degree from an institutional point of view gives us a much perceived sense of legitimacy, particularly in a broader global South idea. Of course, we shouldn't consider every BRICS member to be part of the global South. Russia certainly is not. This is why they like to use expressions like global majority rather than global South. And there is still debate on whether China considers itself part of the global South or not. The idea of having better geographical representation, which was a main driver for many of the countries and many of the countries that really supported the idea of expansion in 2023, is particularly important. We didn't have any members from the Middle East and North Africa before 2023. Now we have countries like Iran, UAE, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, a foot in, a foot out, has been invited, participates in some meetings, but it hasn't declined or formally accepted that. But also the idea of having more categories of participation. We had previously the idea of the members. Now we have members, we have the 9 partners, and we have the idea of the BRICS Plus outreach. Often misconceived the idea of BRICS Plus as what we call the expanded groups, but BRICS Plus has been in place since 2017 of this meeting of a much broader participation of that. And what does it create from an institutional point of view? Complementarity. But within that, there is a lot of risks that come with that. First is the ongoing challenge of an increasingly fragmented and tense geopolitical environment. The very situation of Saudi Arabia of being on the fence is quite explanatory of that we know that Saudi Arabia is considering very important partnerships with many BRICS countries, but at the same time, a country that is actively negotiating with the United States many of the security guarantees. The second challenge that we have is part of some of the highlights of what BRICS has been, that is the idea of consensus decision-making processes. Because the consensus, to a certain degree, has this interesting take within BRICS of being both a mechanism, but often, if we look into how it's presented by its members, is seen as a value. The fact that we are able to reach consensus allows us to deal with difficulties internally in different ways. If we can't find consensus, we either agree to disagree, which is a very important process within a group that does not believe that every single thing should be part of the agenda of BRICS. So we easily take things out of the agenda. But often, to be able to reach consensus, we either have to dilute language, sometimes to the point of irrelevance, or spending a lot of time negotiating them. That is the case now, what we have in terms of the discussions around systems of payments and settling trade in local currencies. It is a complex issue between countries that have very limited economic complementarity with one another. Hence the idea that this takes time until those mechanisms as institutions are there. But there is a major risk there that we get into a decision-making paralysis process, because now with 10 or 11 countries that now have to reach consensus, we saw that recently with the BRICS countries' inability of reaching a declaration after the Ministries of Finance meeting in Brasilia now in April, where some of the big issues and supposedly issues related to language on Security Council reform, particularly differences between the African countries, made it really hard to find consensus and the ability of really getting some of those. And on top of that, we know now with this expanded BRICS, we have imported some of those regional rivalries that We know that in the case of India and China, that creates a lot of bitter rivalries, but at the same time, we make it work. But now, how do we do in situations like countries like Egypt and Ethiopia that have very tense bilateral relations, or Iran, Saudi Arabia? How do we deal with the fact that our own difficulties of finding members from South America and Latin America after Argentina declined the invitation in 2023, and there's not a very clear path on how to create this expansion? So I think all of those mechanisms are particularly important for us to think of what will BRICS become, because it would be naive of us to believe that with all of its different members, that we're still going to operate under the same premises and basis that we have since 2009. The new members are still finding their feet around, and some more active than others, but at some point, they are going to start coming with a much stronger say and voice that will change the dynamics. Hence, this process is that Brazil is very actively pushing this year and has very vocally presented those issues already from 2024 during the Russian presidency of fundamental importance. Because if we don't have clarity around what issues we bring to the table, what is the roles and responsibilities of members, partners, and the role of groups like BRICS Plus within the group, if we don't find mechanisms that allow us to build consensus, but also to manage dissent within the group in a way that we're not only always dealing with minimum common denominators. This is a good way of moderating views within the group, but that bar can become so low that the decisions made by BRICS becomes particularly irrelevant. Sorry, I went much longer than what you gave me, so I'm going to stop here.
Thank you, Gustavo. Thank you. You challenged us a lot with your ideas, and I will have a chance to have a second round later with some of my panelists, and hopefully they will be able to also react to some of your comments. And now I would like to invite Mr. Leandro Vieira, and we're very happy to have Leandro joining us from Abu Dhabi, where he is serving as a career diplomat, as Minister Counselor at the Embassy of Brazil to the UAE. Leandro, we're very happy to have you. Leandro has a very long and extensive experience in multilateralism in general. He served at the Brazilian mission to the UN in Ramallah, has lots of experience overseas. Leandro, thank you for bringing your view directly from the UAE, a new member that has some ideas about joining the group probably, and we would like to hear your views on the UAE view on this expanded BRICS membership, like spaces for cooperation already in the existing mechanisms. What are the opportunities that you see from your experience within within them joining us in the group? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Larissa, distinguished panelists. I thank all the organizers for the opportunity to participate in this panel from Abu Dhabi, where I've been the deputy head of the embassy since 2021. Of course, I speak in my personal capacity. I don't speak on behalf of the embassy here, let alone the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But I'll try to offer in the following minutes some reflections based on my vantage point here in the Gulf, which has allowed me to follow more closely the process of the UAE joining BRICS, and try to shed some light on the inclusion of this country in an expanded BRICS and what it represents and may mean for Brazil's foreign policy. I'd like to illustrate how the UAE views the strategy of diversifying partnerships by what I think is a remarkable quote by Anwar Gargash, who's a diplomatic advisor to the UAE president and a well-known foreign policymaker, when he stated during an event in Abu Dhabi in late 2022 that, and I quote, in diversity lies both strength and autonomy, end of quote. At a time when the UAE were being forced by traditional Western partners to impose unilateral sanctions against Russia, Gargash stated, and I quote again, that the UAE has no interest in choosing sides between great powers, end of quote. I think these are very interesting quotes that I think shed a lot of light on how this country perceives its entry to BRICS, because, you know, a few months later in August 2023, the Emirates joined BRICS as full members, a decision which took effect last year. They had already been members of the New Development Bank since 2021. Therefore, in my personal interpretation, BRICS represents a strategic opportunity for the UAE to diversify partnerships, amplify its voice in global governance, and deepen South-South cooperation. The quest for a multipolar world, not just an emergent reality, but also a shared objective, as Brazil's foreign minister puts it, allows countries such as the UAE to shape global norms in a manner that is perceived here in the Gulf, in the UAE, as complementary, not necessarily contradictory, to its existing robust ties with Western partners. Now, in terms of opportunities within the alliance, as you asked me, Larissa, if we take some of the priority areas identified by the Brazilian BRICS presidency, such as trade, investment, and finance, there are considerable synergies with what the UAE can offer as a full-fledged member and what we think, as I said, as a priority for ourselves. Being a global hub and a bridge between East and West, it is not hard to see the UAE's interest in linking its ports, airports, free zones to the BRICS supply chain initiatives, an asset particularly valuable at times of geopolitical tensions. By the way, the UAE has been a member of the Belt and Road Initiative since 2018. As Professor Baumann said, China is the UAE's largest trading partner, one of the BRICS that has this feature, and makes Dubai an important hub for re-exporting its products to other destinations in Eurasia and Africa. The cooperative efforts to develop local payment instruments that facilitate trade and investment, a key priority for Brazil, and I am mindful of the challenges of implementing that at BRICS level. But this goes to the heart of bilateral initiatives, UAE-India, for example, that have been already enforced for almost 2 years now. The two countries have agreed to settle transactions using their local currencies, the dirham and rupee, by a system known as the local currency settlement. This allows trade between the two countries without needing to convert to US dollars or any other reserve currency. This, of course, reduces transaction costs and simplifies financial operations and is clearly stated as a priority in the Brazilian presidency. Finally, membership in institutions such as the New Development Bank opens financing channels for UAE-backed infrastructure and climate-resilient projects across the global south, especially in Africa, South Asia, and Brazil, where the UAE has shown its interest in expanding its ties. So in a nutshell, in my view, the UAE adds a lot of value to priority areas identified by the Brazilian presidency in BRICS, and helps to expand the bloc's influence with its economic diplomacy and pragmatism in its relations across East and West. Again, as was said earlier, this is a country that does not see BRICS as an antagonistic group of countries, against groups A, B, or C. I think it adds value in a process or in a context that is history in the making with these new, very diverse countries. The UAE strived a lot to be a full-fledged member. I was able to witness this process before 2023, and I would like to see the glass half full in this first intervention and see the brighter days ahead for BRICS as a group of the Global South. Thank you.
Thank you, Leandro. Very inspiring and very interesting to hear this perspective from a new member that, in my view, seems very similar actually to the Brazilian perspective, as you highlighted, also from also a political stance, not only in terms of the economic and trade opportunities. Bauman, I will go back to you now, and this is going to be our last round of questions. So I will let you not only answer the question, but feel free to comment or react to the comments of the other two panelists if you feel like doing that. We have 13 to 14 minutes to finish the panel, so I'll give you all more or less 3 minutes. So first, what is the role that you see for the NDB going forward? Like, do you see any chance they might diversify their portfolio a little bit? How do you feel about that? And again, if you want to react to Gustavo's and Leandro's comments, please feel free.
Thank you, Larissa. Let's go back to the beginning, when the NDB was created. It was meant to be a small unit, not competing with the World Bank, with other banks, but trying to work together in complementary to the other banks in a different type of approach. It has mentioned the use of loans and investment in local currencies, which is a very positive aspect of it. But when you look at the project portfolio of the bank, the approved financing so far, half of the resource are concentrated on transport equipment and the emergency support during the COVID crisis. Well, both are very noble uses. Of course, it goes without saying the pandemic needs, as well as the investment in transport, which is one of the major binding constraints in the whole developing world. So having said that, I understand that there is still this rule in the bank to invest in projects in BRICS members. Now, another aspect at the beginning, another discussion at the beginning was to amplify what's called callable capital. I understand that this has been relaxed. There are a number of new countries providing resources, and that has increased the power of the bank. Now, so far, this sector concentration in transport equipment calls the attention, and is something to raise some eyebrows here and there, because it's not only that, of course, that's 27% of total, but then when you see, for instance, social infrastructure and digital infrastructure, that's less than $1 billion worth of financing. It's too small. Now, what are the chances of diversifying the portfolio, and what are the directions? I think Augusto has named a list of potential items or potential areas where the bank could and should act. Seen from a Latin American perspective, what are our competitive advantages and where are we lacking support? Competitive advantages are natural resources, be it the agro, the mining, and what are we lacking resource? Providing resources for recuperation or inducement of industrial competitiveness and infrastructure, be it transport or energy. These are the main things. On top of that, you have a number of social issues that require financing, require projects. Health is a point in case. I mean, after the COVID experience, clearly there is worldwide need for more significant initiatives in the health sector, which was a sector that was not traditionally considered in these debates, be it infrastructure, be it complementarity in the production of medicines, and so on and so forth. But you have also new challenges related to the so-called new realities. The digital divide that is so determining element in being a binding constraint to a number of developing economies is something to be taken into account very seriously. The digital, not only infrastructure, but the provision of services, as well as support in terms of the design of regulation, exchange of initiatives in terms of design. This is a debate that is very intense here and elsewhere. The European Union, the US, how to deal with this new scenario. This is a new set of challenges that we have to deal with it. Of course, there is an overall challenge, which is climate change. Even not only because of the number of empirical indicators that we have, the floods, the drought here and there, but also the very fact that we have to deal with a number of skeptical authorities in a number of countries, and a number of measures that have been taken that goes against all the efforts to deal with climate change. This is hanging in the air. This is something that is very important, vital to some extent. And in some countries, such as Brazil, that has very much linked to deforestation. So projects, the financing of projects to deal with deforestation is very important to contribute to reduce the Brazilian contribution to the climate crisis, the CO2 emissions in this country. The urban challenges that we have in a number of cities and countries. So the list of topics is really very large. The geographic distribution of the resources by the NDB, it's not homogeneous, and that homogeneity, lack of homogeneity, has to do not only with the political pressure or ideological pressure, or you name it. It has also to do with the very lack of good projects in our countries. So as the people say, good projects find their financing. And that's true also in the relationship, our several countries' relationship with any bank, and the NDB being one of the example. We lack good projects. So it's not that there are no good projects, but there should be far more, a more significant number of good projects, in particular in those areas that I have mentioned. Not only infrastructure, but also social dimensions, environmental dimensions, lack of initiatives to foster competitiveness, and so on and so forth. So I think that if I was sitting on President Dilma's chair, I would look for a completely new type of word or of listing of issues to try and finance, so as to diversify the project portfolio of the bank. And I think there is a very good opportunity right now, because as Augusto has just mentioned, the Brazilian presidency is putting very clearly a number of dimensions or of sectors that should be the objects of a more direct action by the bank. On the other side of the table, there is the challenge of providing the bank with good projects to be financed. So it's a half empty and half full glass. And
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you, Bauman. I will now invite Gustavo and Leandro for their final comments. So, Gustavo, please feel free to make your closing remarks. If you can do that in 2 minutes, that will be valuable, and then I'll give the floor to Leandro.
Thank you so much, Larissa, and I'll make sure I'm very brief this time. No, I think these discussions are important because it brings this reflection around how do we make sure that we don't make BRICS too hierarchical within this different space. And I think the conversations we've had so far, the different presentations talk about that, keeping a certain type of more flexible, consensus-based discussions, but at the same time that makes the group manageable. I think part of the challenge is that we make BRICS to become a little bit like G77, which becomes incredibly difficult to manage on a day-to-day basis. It's one of those historically important, but talking to diplomats in different parts of the global south that are working on G77, is incredibly frustrating for them. But I think that perhaps what Brazil can do this year is to foster many of these questions. I don't think that the overall discussion around the nature or the existential idea of the identity of BRICS will be resolved in 2025 alone. But we do have some likelihood of meaningful progress. So questions that I think Augusto mentioned in the beginning: do we need a secretariat for such an informal grouping or not? And perhaps Brazil could feel that there is. I'm not saying that Brazil necessarily thinks that, but we know different members feel that. How do we do basic things like having a common website of BRICS, that we don't have to reinvent the wheel year after year and trying to figure out where the decisions for a specific ministerial meeting are of 2017 or 2024? How do we create and think about mechanisms that track decisions that we make and create accountability processes of those decisions that at the same time do not take away the voluntary nature of being part of a group like BRICS? How do we better triangulate with complementary groupings internationally? In that sense, a triangle that should be much more clear when it comes to G20, BRICS, G7. We had a golden opportunity this year, and I know in a lot of fields like AI and so on, Brazil and South Africa have been talking a lot of this continuation between the Brazilian G20 presidency and the South African G20 presidency. But I think we need to think much more deliberately around that. And the final question I think we need to think about is that how do we make sure that these institutions that we already have, we mentioned NDB and the need for better financing and so on, but we need to think of things like the CRA that has been in place for as long as the NDB, has never been utilized, even in cases where countries asked for funds from the IMF, and they could have done that with the CRA, which was the case of South Africa during the COVID-19 pandemic. But at the same time, we can't run away from these questions. There is emerging pressures for increasing clarity around the roles, both from a functional point of view, from an internal pressure from many of the members, and Brazil being the most active of them, the risks of having these institutional drifts. But we do need to engage with that if we don't want to make sure that either BRICS becomes an irrelevant group or one that becomes always captured by many of those much more visible and assertive views that many of our members do. And I think the work on the TOR that Brazil is doing this year with the task force and so on can really help us to at least formalize some of those discussions and to continue pushing BRICS into a much more deliberate approach within an informal institution that it wants to preserve its own informality. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Gustavo. Leandro, I will call you for your final remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much once again, Larissa. I think this, given that it's a panel on the shared principles to joint action, and you did mention the twin transition and the energy transition being one of them. You know, I can't resist but to touch upon this aspect, because the UAE is a prominent oil producer. And I think I would like to break a bit this outdated vision that, you know, being the UAE a prominent oil producer, it's one of those oil monarchies of the Gulf, you know, and offering often this vision would be oversimplistic. It would be completely anachronistic and would miss, I think, very relevant recent developments. And given that we want deliverables, once again, we would like to look at the half full bit of the glass, because I do believe that there is room for optimism. The UAE does not position itself at either pole of the energy spectrum. It seems like a bridge between fossil fuel producers and clean energy innovators, advocating for a realistic transition that ensures that energy security, economic growth, and climate goals can coexist. Now, at first glance, this perspective may seem a bit counterintuitive, given that the UAE is still among the countries with the highest carbon dioxide emissions per capita, and the population of residents is still among the largest consumers of water and electricity worldwide. However, what be a vulnerability in light of the aforementioned elements has been treated here as a historic opportunity to seek profound changes in its national energy matrix through significant investments in clean and renewable energy sources, seeking to maximize the advantages of its geography in this process, especially with regard to solar and wind sources. Let us not forget that the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, is headquartered in Abu Dhabi, and that has been the case since 2009, right? The Abu Dhabi Future Energy Company, known here as Masdar, has been at the forefront of innovation and investment regarding energy efficiency and clean sources of energy, with investments of billions of dollars in dozens of countries. And at the same time, this country invests heavily in reducing the carbon footprint of fossil fuel extraction. So I guess that the BRICS, the BRICS grouping for the UAE offers an opportunity to seek a convergence between producer and consumer interests, setting, for example, long-term expectations for supply stability, There is in BRICS less politicization of energy transition debates compared to Western-led fora, allowing for more, let's say, technocratic cooperation focused on pragmatism rather than ideology. And this aligns quite well with the UAE's legacy from COP28 in Dubai a year and a half ago, when it emphasized that the need for a phased, just, and orderly transition resonates strongly with many BRICS members. If we take another priority area clearly stated by Brazil's BRICS presidency, climate change, for example, we ought to remember that presidents of COP28, 29, and 30 established the presidential troika, so a political coordination mechanism here in the UAE in Dubai early 2024, aiming to guide global efforts to achieve climate resilience by 2030, building on the UAE consensus, which is, the landmark outcome of COP28. And speaking of deliverables, very few days ago, a joint communique that was issued in the 10th Energy Ministers meeting under Brazil's chairship recognizes the need to promote just, orderly, and equitable energy transitions, and even a roadmap for BRICS energy cooperation for the next 5 years has been approved. So I guess that in this context, the UAE can be instrumental in bridging the gap between fossil fuel dependence and net zero ambitions through cooperation, investment, and innovation. Again, this convergence of interests adds value, in my opinion, to an expanded BRICS in accordance with Brazil's vision and priorities, and we should take advantage of this historic opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Leandro. I must say that I learned so much from this panel. I knew it was going to be good, but I'm very surprised by the amount of information that we got since our keynote speaker, Augusto Castro, to the panel. And I thank all our panelists for being here with us. I thank our audience. We will now have a break of 5 minutes, and then we will start panel number 2, which will be guided and moderated by my colleague here, Mr. Feliciano Guimarães, a very well-known international relations professor here in Brazil, besides being my colleague at CEBRI, and you will be in very good hands for the second panel. So thank you very much once again. So in my clock now, it says 10:19 because we are in Brasilia, so I think we'll be back in 5 minutes, which means whatever time you are, 24, right? So please just take a bio break, and we'll be waiting for you when you're back. Thank you. Bye.
E aí, Henrique?
Oi, Rafa, e aí, tudo bem? Nós estamos no break time aqui.
Eu não sabia se a gente pode continuar ou não, então eu acabei de ver que está parar a gravação. Tinha que parar?
Oi, Feliciano.
Hello, Anit.
What's up?
Hello,
Oi.
Paella. Hello, Wang.
Oi, Paila.
Tudo bem?
Hello. Hi, Feliciano,
Hello.
Leandro, Anit. Okay.
Good morning, everyone from Brazil again. Have a good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone watching us from all over the world. It's a pleasure to host the second panel on our event on BRICS at CEBRI with the sponsor of Siemens Energy. And I'd like again to thank Mr. Henrique Paiva for all the support throughout this project. And for being here with us, and the intellectual support as well for putting together this panel. The title of the second panel is related to our priorities for the project here at CEBRI, which is the twin transition, energy and digital. And the title is Joint Action for Sustainable and Digital Future. And we have now with us three distinguished panelists. First from China, Mr. Wang Wang. Mr. Wang Wang is the Dean of the Xiangyang Institute for Financial Studies at the Renmin University of China and Dean of the School of Global Leadership. He also serves in key academic advisory roles, including the Executive Director of the China-US People-to-People Exchange Research Center and Secretary General of the Green Finance Committee. He's a former Global Times editor and China News Award winner. Dr. Wang has authored over 30 books and visited nearly 100 countries for research. He's China's one of the most influential think tank leaders. It's a pleasure and honor to have you here with us. Secondly, we have Ms. Rafaela Guedes. Rafaela Guedes is an independent consultant, is a senior fellow at the Brazilian Center for International Relations, been working with us for many years in a number of projects. We rely a lot on Rafaela Guedes' expertise and on a number of issues at CEBRI. She's an international advisor at the APCO and a member of the panel on experts of energy transition at the Institute for Climate Society. She has 18 years of professional experience in the energy industry, and for the last 7 years has been dedicated to energy transition strategy, strategic planning, sustainability, and most recently business development. She leads one of CEBRI's most important research projects on energy transition. We also have a good friend of ours, Mr. Anit Mukherjee. He's a senior fellow at the ORF America, where he leads the program on global economics and development policy. He lived some time in Brazil, so every time we have a meeting with him, we have the pleasure to speak with his very good Portuguese. He works focuses on the governance of emerging digital economy, including the use of technology to accelerate financial inclusion and achieve sustainable development goals. And his research interests also include financing and digital public infrastructure, the reform of multilateral development systems, and expanding social protection system. So just like the previous panel, the idea here is that I'll pose the questions and each of the panelists will have 5 minutes to answer on the issues that we previously discussed. And then we'll do another round of discussions that each of the panelists can comment on the previous talks, but also on the previous panels, the very interesting previous panel that we held. And I think there is a lot to discuss here. So I will start with Mr. Wang Wang. With the first questions. In the context of the growing calls to reform to the global financial architecture, how do you see the role of BRICS institutions, particularly the New Development Bank, in advancing a more inclusive and sustainable financial model? What potentials do you see for expanding instruments such as green bonds and local currency financing within the expanded BRICS? Mr. Wang Wen, thank you again for being here with us. The screen and the floor is yours. Can he hear us? I think, let me see. Maybe there is a delay.
Is it my opportunity to speak?
Yes. Maybe there is a delay.
Okay.
Can you hear us
Thank
now?
you. Yeah, I do thank you for the invitation. And I've just talked with a friend from Brazil an hour before I joined this meeting, and we were discussing the very increasing closer relationship of China and Brazil and its influence on the whole global governance. And I do think that the green cooperation for the sustainable development it's much more important for us right now in the future because currently China and the Brazil cooperation is more focusing on the trade, commerce cooperation. Also, China, Latin America's cooperation is more focused on that. But if we can add more materials in our cooperation, for example, the sustainable development, the anti-pollution, for the green development, then we're going to have more and more cooperation points or sectors in the future. So I do see this a really great opportunity for China, Brazil, and China and Latin American countries to continue more cooperation in the future. And we believe that it's also good for BRICS because it's going to be a very good example. All BRICS are developing countries, though some of the BRIC countries do not recognize themselves developing countries, but they are really still developing, right? So they're going to show a very brighter future for the BRICS developing countries can have a better cooperation opportunities in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Wang Wei. Thank you for your answer. Now I'll pass I'll pose a question to Ms. Rafaela Guedes. What is the role of BRICS in advancing a just and effective energy transition across the global south? How can the group promote collaboration to scale up clean energy solutions and to reduce asymmetries in access to technology and finance? Rafaela, you have the floor. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Feliciano. Thank you to my colleagues. It's a pleasure. And I'm really happy and excited to be here in this panel. Well, first and foremost, I think that BRICS has a lot of challenges, but at the same time, common goals and interests. So all of them have a dual challenge, basically, that from the one hand, if you sum the countries that are within BRICS Plus, you will get to 45% of global CO2 emissions. So on one hand, you have a lot of challenges within the emissions. And then from the other side, you have to reduce these emissions, but cope with the fact that all of us need to continue gaining momentum in terms of economical development. And most of these countries are still in the stage of developing and need to enhance the quality of life of its citizens. So with that, we definitely need to speak a lot. And I think that COP30 will bring this to the table, is bringing this to the table. So we need more access to inclusive capital, reducing dependency probably on West-led institutions, and how can we evolve in terms of enhancing the collaborations. China and Brazil have been doing this a lot. I also acknowledge the challenge, the exchanges we have with China, but also with India, with Africa, and growing with the Middle East as well. So there's a lot of opportunities for us to enhance this integration. Then how to discuss scalable and science-based transition pathways. Each country, each region will have its own pathways, so it's not only a common path. Each one will have to understand its strengths, its weaknesses, where can it evolve more faster than others. And then I think it's important for us to discuss local currency green bonds if we're talking about these energy solutions and reducing asymmetries in terms of technology and finance. So green bonds have been helping a lot, and we are able to scale that. Technology bank, joint R&D platforms. So all of these are forms of collaboration and a mutual search for gain-gain solutions. So just to start, I think that building these relationships and different forms of collaboration and partnerships is really something that we should enhance and will definitely help to speed up the transition.
Thank you, Rafaela. Thank you for your answer. Now I'll pose a question to Anit in the area of a sustainable digital infrastructure that we've been discussing at BRICS. How can BRICS countries collaborate to promote sustainable digital infrastructure, including green data centers and low carbon connectivity, as part of their development strategy? Anit, please, you have the floor. And thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Feliciano. Thank you, everyone. And there's so many friends that I am seeing here. And thank you for bringing me on the BRICS agenda, because I've kind of tried to keep away from it for a while because I'm a very big believer in IBSA, India, Brazil, South Africa, which was the precursor.
We'll always bring you back, don't worry.
Precursor to BRICS. And I still believe that those three countries have something which binds us together, which has transmitted to BRICS and now the BRICS Plus. So just acknowledging that we come from a much deeper space, from a cooperation between India, Brazil, and South Africa, and then, of course, Russia and China. To answer the question, I think two things. First of all, it has been a fascinating discussion. I'm not an international relations expert. I'm an economist, so my worldview is kind of colored by numbers. But just to think of the kind of issues that my previous panelists had put on the table, and I'm trying to structure my intervention in that framework. And one of them is that there are inherent disparity between different levels of maturity of both the sustainable economy, the tools that go into it, and the digital economy. And there are different tensions that are there between the two countries. Having said that, I think the two things that you raise, that green digital center, what is a sustainable digital infrastructure? It's not an easy answer to give, but let's take the two examples that you've given, green data centers and low carbon connectivity. Now, in my mind, the data center debate is new, and it's being driven by AI and the applications of AI, which are very energy intensive, right? So for example, if you think of if you just say that we are going to use AI tools and models for data processing, India produces 25% of the world's data, and we have 3% of the data processing capacity, right? So obviously, we will have to ramp up our data processing capacity, right? And to do that with the existing technologies would require serious investment and also energy, right? And I don't think that we have that bandwidth right now to invest in that amount of data infrastructure, given all the other challenges that we have. And I think this is something that most of the BRICS countries, and I can't say all, most of the BRICS countries will face. It's the same problem that Egypt will face. It's the same problem Indonesia is facing. And I would presume it's the same problem Brazil and South Africa will face. We have limited supply of energy. We need more. If we assume that we need the data processing capacity to the extent that is being talked about, then there is a problem, right? And I'll come to the solutions. So the green data center issue is part of a national energy transition strategy. It's not just about green data centers. It's about how your whole energy transition as a country, you are making sure that the mix is right. The inclusive low carbon connectivity, let's take that. Again, inclusive connectivity is part of your digital transformation agenda of a country. Brazil has its inclusive digital transformation agenda. India has ours. Every country has it. How do you then layer the sustainability agenda on top of that? Now, I would say that honestly, connectivity has become much cheaper. In fact, this Zoom is on what is the HD cloud. I just saw that cloud HD video meeting. 15 years ago, cloud computing was really expensive. Now it is not. We can talk across the world very cheaply and reducing more. I don't have to fly to Rio de Janeiro to have, or Sao Paulo to have this meeting. So I'm actually reducing carbon intensity due to this connectivity. So I think the point here I'm trying to make, Chair, is that in this scenario where we today are looking at the twin transitions, we should not be colored, or we should not get obsessed with what is the current demand or what is the current flavor of the month, let's put it that way. And therefore, if we abstract a little bit from that, let's say green data centers. Again, I'm just going to take a particular example. What do we need to do? We need to increase the energy efficiency of data centers, right? And for that, there are technologies available today, maybe Siemens has it, to cool down, cooling technologies for the data centers that are being built. And as you cool it down more efficiently, you require less energy. So I think there are technologies that are available, probably in the private sector, probably in the multilateral system, which can then be financed by, say, an NDB. And as the President Bauman was saying, we need to change the mix of how that financing happens. And I'll stop with the last point, the second point. I think we are at least I'm sitting in Washington, D.C., and the prevailing notion is that AI models are this humongous data hogs that we need to build more complex and systems. I have a different take on this. I think that with some advancement from China, for example, DeepSeek, and others that we are building in India, LLMs, these are low-cost models. These are low-intensity, energy-intense models. These do not require the amount of energy that a traditional LLM from OpenAI or other companies do. And they are not needed for us. We need more with smaller, more efficient AI models. And that would drop down the cost of how countries are using these systems and make it more sustainable. I'll stop there, and I'm happy to come back and have some more thoughts.
Thank you, Anit. I think you touched upon a number of issues that are very important for us here in Brazil, and also CEBRI, which is the Brazil's position in this AI landscape, and how data centers will play a role in on that. So I think we can come back to that later on and discuss this a little bit. I like the idea of this discussion being part of the national strategy of developing countries, and the differences among the BRICS countries concerning that, and the difficulties among BRICS countries to coordinate their actions on these issues, because exactly they have national priorities that they're very different from each other. I don't know if Mr. Wang Wen is still with us. I would like to pose a second question to him. Maybe there's a delay on his camera. Let's see. So I think I'll go to Rafaela, and then if Mr. Wang Wen is back, I can ask him again. So Rafaela, our second question, I think is also an issue that we've been discussing at CEBRI in a number of other panels, and is becoming more and more a political issue in Brazil, which is the issue of critical minerals, right? And how this affects supply chains in general. So the question is, how can the expanded BRICS cooperate on the critical minerals agenda to secure sustainable supply chains and strengthen strategic autonomy and energy transition? What are your ideas on that?
Coming back to a bit of what Anit brought, we have to all the time balance what is common interests and what have been the common discussions, and then what are the goals and the challenges that happen within the countries. As we evolve in all the geopolitics that have been involved in critical minerals discussions, and coming from a point where more and more we have been discussing all forms of security. So security, and then we can talk about mineral security, energy security, and so. But I do believe that said, there is a lot of common ground for collaboration. For all these countries where we are rich in minerals, and that's true for Brazil, that's true for Africa. In the Middle East, we see a lot of involvement in terms of exploitation as well. So in all these regions, one common thing is that we want to be able to enhance the value aggregation within our territories. So all the discussion within the how to accelerate, how to continue to extract, but at the same time how to add value, and then then the discussion. How can we make this possible in a time where it's much more complex even than energy, because you have ups and downs in terms of price. And Anit, I like that you said that you're an economist. I too have this as a background, and numbers. It's all about numbers, and then the complicated parts is that to start developing or start extracting, we're speaking about the time lead that is more than 10 years, 15 years. So things that coming to the solutions and not only the problems. So discussing data mapping and data infrastructure is very important. Brazil has stopped in time for most of its data setting or being able to present what are we capable of offering, and then comparing that, and I'm proud to say that CEBRI, we are leading this discussion together with the government and with the Brazilian Institute of Minerals to discuss what will be our demand for minerals, and then what are we capable of supplying. But then having this data is very important. Then another point that I will mention here is about doing this with common sustainability and traceability standards. So we have to take care of human rights. We have to take care of the way we explore these minerals, because we've had a lot of issues. So acknowledging where we stand and the troubles that we had in the past, it's very important so that we can evolve and really develop this in a way that the communities are also taken care of and are able to evolve as society. So, and then the regional value chains. So of course, Brazil will not be able to do everything. So when we say that we will add value, I will give a concrete example now. Vale, which is the biggest mining company here in Brazil, produces a lot of iron ore. But then, since we have a lot of renewable energy, why not use this renewable energy in like solar and wind, but specifically wind in the northeast region, to process these minerals and transform them into HBI, which is hot briquetted iron, which has a higher quality. It's easier to export. So we have a beneficiation, or we have a value addition here. It's not going to be feasible for everything. So what kinds of processing can we do? How can we enhance this? So discussing these regional value chains. So until where we go in Brazil, until where we go in Africa, what can be done in the Middle East? How can we export to China, exchange knowledges? These are all the things that are on the table, and hopefully we will be able to discuss more and more. But it's all about getting to solutions that can retain more value within the regions and help to develop the countries. Thank you, Feliciano.
Thank you, Rafaela. Now I'll pose a second question to Anit. And Anit, please feel free to comment on the other panelists' remarks. And the question is, what role can BRICS play in shaping global digital governance, particularly in advancing inclusive, secure, and equitable standards for emerging technologies?
Thank you, Feliciano. And Rafael, I cannot agree more, right? The whole, I think one of the things that we miss in BRICS is how, and with the BRICS expansion, right, how well it is placed as an organization to take advantage of those regional value chains. I think you mentioned critical minerals. I'm having a discussion on a project in India with the Ministry of Renewable Energy to do urban mining. So there's a lot of recycling of e-waste that happens, right? And it's global. It's a global issue. But you can, because of the concentration of critical minerals supply to one country, which is China, other countries are looking at different ways of accessing critical minerals, and one of them is actually recycling. And if you can increase the efficiency of recycled e-waste, you can get not trace amounts, I'm told, quite a bit. But this is a global issue. Brazil has the same issue. India has the same issue. I think Africa has the same issue. So if you think of 5 or 6 countries in the BRICS and then say that, okay, we could become an urban mining recycling hub and then use that as part of those value chains. I think that's certainly something that BRICS should look at. Coming back to Feliciano's question, standards have been a problem, right? If you look at Kazan, if you look at Johannesburg, if you look at the minister's declaration, chair's statement, it was not a declaration. I'm now getting a bit used to the international relations. The chair's statement is different from a declaration. I had no idea that the two were different. I think the tension is this, Feliciano. When the internet happened, right, in the mid-90s, or even earlier, it was based on protocols. It was based on a set of protocols for data exchange. For, HTTP is actually hypertext transfer protocol. And then it was the secure hypertext transfer protocol. TCP/IP, you name it, server exchanges. These were all protocols that were designed in a very decentralized way, pretty inclusive. And then you built on it. And the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, took on some of the work. The UN took on some of the work. And then there were consultative bodies. For what, I still think AI is a hype cycle, but leave that aside. If you think that the way that AI is developing, there's no protocols. That people are doing things their own way. We are creating models and then saying, how do those models transfer? What is the stack? Whether it's efficient or whether it is equitable, we don't know. China is going ahead with its own way, and the US is in its own way, India is going it, and I'm sure Brazil too. Where we can come back to is the idea of having, say, open standards. Now, Meta is talking about open standards for their models. DeepSeek is an open source, but there are differences in opinions. So if we think that the future development of this emerging technology will be based on a set of protocols, and BRICS within itself has 3 or 4 very important countries who have the capacity, who are the innovators, who are the users, and then let's sit down and talk about what standards we want, right? I'll give you an example from digital public infrastructure, which I've worked on. Today, Brazil is utilizing it in some way. It came from India, but I don't believe that it did. I believe that it grew organically. And now 50 countries have said, yeah, this is a good idea. We need interoperable standards. We need transferability of data. We need a stack. We need an ID system. All that to say that instead of spreading ourselves too thin, and this was from the previous discussion as well, previous panel, if we can find 3 things in this area that we want to work on and just concentrate on that, have a task force, and have for the next BRICS president is India. So we would be very happy to take this forward, I would presume, because it tallies with what we are doing. So I think going back to your question, advancing global digital governance in a global sphere, I don't think BRICS is the right forum because of the internal tension that we have within BRICS and the differences in capacity. However, as an organization which can contribute to those debates in a very specific way, for example, how do we have a protocol for the future development of artificial intelligence in areas like health, in areas like education, in areas like infrastructure or energy? I think that's the starting point for, or I think that's a process that the BRICS can take forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Anit. I think this is a very good point, the last part of your answer, which is the BRICS maybe is not the best forum for this type of discussion because it's not. You need a global platform, a global protocols and standards, and a number of issues related to artificial intelligence. But we have to remember that G7 is, for example, is not the best platform either. So what happened in these scenarios is that these different groupings, such as G7 or OECD or BRICS, they are formed for consultation in which the countries they can kind of find their common position all together. And then they eventually bring to more internationalized forums, such as the United Nations General Assembly or others. So there is this is additional benefits of grouping like that. But you are also right that there is a possibility of increasing fragmentation if that doesn't happen, which is different groupings, but because the different countries are represented in these groupings, that they can create their own standards on specific areas of AI, right? So there is also the back side of it, right? So Anit, did you raise your hand?
Yeah, just a quick point. I think a lot of the, I was tracking the G20 declarations on technology and the BRICS technology declaration, and there are serious overlaps between, and there are a lot of overlaps, right? But we are not sure about how the G20 will pan out, because the next president is the United States of America. So all the work that we have done from Indonesia, Brazil, India, Brazil, South Africa, we don't know whether many of that will be continued. So, as a forum, BRICS was, your G20 was very inclusive, and there were declarations, 4 consecutive declarations with agreed principles. That framework needs to now is uncertain. I'm not saying that it will not exist, but it's uncertain. I leave it to the international relations experts to deal with this. But if that becomes not the forum of agreement between different, countries with different capacities, which one does? And I don't see any other than BRICS. Sorry, I wanted to make that intervention.
Another very good point. I mean, when you look at the history of the G20, the majority of the declarations from one presidency to the other, they're overlapping, because every time there is a new presidency, that country wants to see its own contribution take into consideration to the next presidency. So in this sense, they respect what is coming from the previous presidencies. And as you said, with now Donald Trump and the US as the next G20 presidency, we don't know if this standard will continue. So there's not only on artificial intelligence or digital transition, but in all the other issues as well. So I don't know if Mr. Wan Wen is still with us. I think he has some technical problems. His connection is still here showing up. We have a couple more minutes. And I have like general questions, and then I think I'll pose these questions to both Rafaela and Anit, and then with this they can give their concluding remarks, which are related to the general idea of the panel, right? And I think I have 2 general questions, and then you see which one is a more fit for you to answer. So number 1 would be, what would be the recommendations you might have for the BRICS to become a platform for the building cross-sectoral coalitions in these 2 agendas, energy transition and digital transition? And number 2, how can the BRICS leapfrog traditional development paths by investing in digital transformation and boosting a common energy transition strategy? So I'll pass the floor back to Rafaela for her general thoughts and answers to these questions, and then we end with Anit. Rafaela, please.
Sorry, I was on mute. So in terms of recommendations and what could evolve in terms of BRICS Plus, I think there are things that we have been discussing, and I saw this a bit on the first one. So promote formalized cross-sectoral task forces with themes that evolve in terms of common ground, because when thinking about there, of course, each country will have its challenges and its culture and its ideas, but there's always points of interaction and points that are common. So the ones that are common, and then I can mention between Brazil and India, biofuels, for instance, but then we can speak about digital infrastructure. We can be discussing the sustainable mining and how to enhance value for the territory. So there are many angulars that have common ground. So these ones that are common, we should formalize cross-sectoral task forces in terms of evolving and seeing how each one can reach to things that will help enhance quality of life, economy, and sustainability in these regions. Another thing to be discussed is, although we have a formal institution that is the BRICS Plus, why not a forum to convene stakeholders at least once a year? And I definitely think that think tanks are good conveners because we are able to articulate between government, private sector, and the third sector, but and academia and everything, but convening and trying to enhance this common ground. Then another thing that I think is very, very, very rich, and it comes, and to your point about circularity and the mining's in the city, so and everything that we have been seeing evolving. So joint incubators, accelerators, startups. This is something that we should evolve more and more. So as more as we have innovation and thinking about lean, nimble forms of producing are things that will help us evolve and bring more innovation and bring more opportunities to the territories. So I will leave it here. And the last point that I am extremely they are very important for me is multilateral education and training initiatives for two reasons. Training and education, and Feliciano will agree, he's at USP, but especially when we have this interaction. So Rafaela going to India, Rafaela going to China, China coming to Brazil, because we create these bonds, we create, we go with more empathy, we go and understand the other's point of view. So these are things that I do believe that would help enhance discussions within the territories and get into better solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rafaela. I think Mr. Wang Wen is back. He had some technical problems. Can you hear us? Wen?
Yes, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry.
No
my dear colleagues.
No problem. We're on the final remarks. I don't know if you want, if you had any other thoughts on this, on the discussion of the twin transitions on digital transition and green transitions on the discussion here. I can pass the floor back to Anit now, and then I go back to you, and you give your final thoughts on that. What do you think?
Let's go ahead.
All right, okay. Anit, please, you have the floor, and then I go back to one at the end.
Yeah, I would make it very brief. Rafaela, you mentioned something called empathy. I think that is what we have built over so many years of interconnections. I know I've been grateful to have had this opportunity to both with China and Brazil and South Africa, and it's enriched me. So I think that empathy point is very important. I think where from that point comes what we can do together, but understanding each other sometimes in a group is the first step. So I appreciate what you just said. Feliciano, I think my key takeaway on this is in BRICS or within BRICS, and now with BRICS Plus, and as you saw in the chair's statement, political high-level commitments would become more and more difficult. Right. There were, and I'm not going to go into the process by which this happened. There was no declaration. But the private sector has gone way ahead. The private sector is they're interacting even with differences of opinion at the political level. China is still one of India's big trading partners, right? So it is going to go ahead. The private sector is going to go ahead and do things which are innovative, which are cost effective. So India, I think, organized the startup forum last year, the BRICS Startup Forum, and I think it will continue to do that in the next year. And there is the AI Action Summit. So I think there is a lot of involvement of the private sector in many different fields. And to your point about cross-sectoral collaboration and how we can leapfrog, I think that's where the innovations will come from. And as you see which innovations are applicable to your perspective, and there's a knowledge sharing, and maybe it's not a formal platform. Sometimes formal platforms are difficult to create and maintain, but informally having those spaces for the private sector to to interact and to find each other. I think that would be a very important part of the BRICS and the expanded BRICS. I'll stop there and I'll leave. I'm curious to hear what Professor Wen is going to say.
And thank you, Anit. Professor Wang, I have the second question that I would pose to you, and I think it's a good question that you can give your final thoughts, is exactly on this the twin transition, right? And the question is, how can sustainable trade and investment among BRIC countries contribute to building a joint agenda for a more resilient, green, and digital inclusive future? It's a very broad question, but I think you can elaborate from there on your final thoughts on that. Mr. Wang, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the time. I will be very short. So you're right. To the transfer of digital and AI transfer, that's also called that's a one transfer. Another one is a green transfer. That's the second biggest transfer of our whole development forward function, the forward way, right? So you are mentioning how the sustainable trade can contribute. Yes, China and Brazil it has a lot of let's say classic trade in oil, in agriculture, right? We should all turn that to be green gradually, right? We know that the Brazilian agriculture somehow, I think from my own perspective, it's not as green as Chinese agriculture. It's using much water. It's using more land to produce less agriculture. But if we can use as little land to produce as more as the food, it's gonna be greener, right? Also, from the mining perspective, if we can use the green energy to produce mine. If we can use the solar panel electricity, the EV to produce mine, they're going to be greener, right? And we can set some limits in trade, or set some encouragement in trade for those are using green energy, and those are using less power to produce more food, to encourage them to do so. In that way, we're going to have a practical way to increase our greener development. That's number one. And number two is that in Chinese agriculture system, if you come to China, look at Chinese agriculture currently, they will have many drones. They will have their many artificial intelligence using in agriculture and also in the mining industry, which is, I think, is really advanced. If we can put forward those techniques also in those sectors in our BRICS country, they're going to be more AI and more green, right? That's to answer your question. And to conclude, I think it's, as long as we are in a manner of development, it's also important to think of the human rights in this new era, right? How to protect our new human rights in the digital era, in the green era, how to protect those that cannot catch up with the newest technologies, those people's interests, to help them to grow, to help them to follow up this green trend, to follow up this AI trend, to follow up this digital trend. And we're going to have a second human rights roundtable in July 25th in São Paulo. And we are going to discuss about it, and hope at that time we can have more thoughts on this topic under this very great era. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Wayne. It's good to know that you'll be in São Paulo in July. So I'm here in São Paulo. So send a message. We'll meet here. You touch upon a very important issue, which is in a country like, in a developing country like Brazil, which is the exclusion of many people in terms of,
yes,
of digital access and also green energy access. Something that is very important for us, is a priority for Brazil's national government, this current administration. Hopefully, we'll stay that way in the next couple of years. So we are running out of time. It's 11:10 here in Brazil. I would like to thank very much our three panelists, Mr. Anit Mukherjee from India, talking to us from Washington, D.C., Ms. Rafaela Guedes, talking from Rio, a senior fellow of CEBRI, and Professor Wang Wen from China. And thank you for being with us here. Now we're just going to jump to our concluding remarks between me and Mr. Henrique Paiva, who is also here, to sum up a little bit of the discussions we had here today. So thank you for the three panelists, and stay with us just 10 more minutes for our concluding remarks. Henrique, you're there? There you are. I can see you.
Yes. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the participation of everybody of this enriched discussion. I've learned a lot, and definitely this is a very, I would say, strategic event for us that support Siemens Energy also to drive and to design our strategy based on what BRICS can mean to us and what exactly the BRICS expanded can bring to us, and how can we design a common strategy that has synergies between all of these different nations and so on. So again, nothing more to say. I'm really, really thankful for the participation and the organization of CEBRI. Learn a lot. Really looking forward for what will come from our side event, and later on what will be our conclusions of this. So just a big clap for all the organizations and a big thank for the participants here. Thank you so much. So Feliciano, the ball is with you.
Thank you, Henrique. Thank you for all the support that Siemens has given us since the beginning of the project. As Henrique mentioned, we're gonna have side events on the in July, close to the summit in Rio. But also we are producing a number of policy papers with many of the participants here are writing this policy paper with us that we're gonna produce and present in this side event. This is a project led by CEBRI, sponsored by Siemens Energy, and we are very thankful for that. And the capacity of academic director of CEBRI, I've been doing this job for 3 years on top of being a professor here at University of São Paulo. We have a number of foreign governments that are associated with CEBRI, and a number of others that contact CEBRI throughout the year to discuss a number of international relations and foreign policy issues. And I have to say to you that I have always, when I'm invited, and I go to these meetings very, very often, and I have always to answer about BRICS. So this is especially if it's an European or an American or Canadian partner, when they're going to discuss about Brazilian foreign policy or the status of the world and global governance, one of the first questions is BRICS. And I have always to justify BRICS, right? Why is Brazil in BRICS, and why BRICS is an important platform? And when we got the contact from Siemens Energy, a German company headquartered in Brazil, in São Paulo, that they had the interest in sponsoring this project, we were very happy to say, look, there's a lot to discuss about BRICS, a lot to disclaim about BRICS to our European partners, to our American partners, for them to see that BRICS cannot be and should not be a platform that is anti-West or anti the interests of European and American companies and countries, right? For us, as you could hear from the first keynote speaker from the Minister of Foreign Affairs, BRICS is above all an economic and political opportunity for Brazil to increase its international presence, its international participation, to reform global governance, and to produce and promote intra-BRICS trade, investment, and relations in general. Brazil will never, if it is within Brazil's capacity to allow BRICS to turn into something different from what its origins, and it's the heart and the origin of BRICS, which is reform global governance to improve participation of these countries, is still out there. And even with BRICS expanded, the countries request to be new members of BRICS because they believe on this core principles of BRICS, right? As I always say, there are a number of countries that want to join BRICS, and we don't know what is the phone number of the G7. How can I be a part of the G7? We don't know. The fact that there are more than 40 countries that are lined up to be members of BRICS is a symptom of how effective has been this grouping in the last 15 years. And I remember when the BRICS was formed in 2008, 2009, I was still doing my PhD, and BRICS didn't appear to be something that would evolve to something that we see today. 15 years have passed, and there's a study that IPE is producing that I'm looking forward to read. And as Marcelo Baumann mentioned, and they only cover 30% of the agreements and declarations produced by BRICS countries, and there are already 180 or something initiatives together. Now if this 30% is 180, by the time they finalize 100%, will be 500 or 600 joint initiatives among the BRIC countries. So when the Emirates want to join BRICS, as we witnessed with Leandro Vieira's remarks, we'll see that they see UAE sees BRICS as a great opportunity for them for the reasons that was given by Leandro Vieira, but also they see that BRICS is a rising platform, is a rising group in general from an economic and political point of view. We have the biggest challenge, and many of these challenges have been pointed out today here, and we have been discussing this challenge, but we have to face this challenge. We have to because there's going to be new challenges coming up. So I think this project with Siemens and CEBRI, it's a great opportunity for all of us to continue to discuss this platform, to use this presence of BRICS in Brazil, July to push forward the Brazil vision of what BRICS should be, and how BRICS could continue to expand. So thank you, all the panelists, for being here with us today. And thank you, Siemens, again. And stay tuned, because we're going to have more events like this, policy papers coming up, and the side events and around the first week of July in Rio. Too bad that this year, when Brazil has the presence of BRICS, there is COP30. We love COP30, don't get me wrong, but too bad that these two things are happening the same year, so we cannot discuss BRICS throughout the year. We're going to have we're like focusing on this first semester and trying to produce as much as possible until July. So have a good day for those who are in Brazil, and I hope to see you again. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Take care.